there's a concept called buying the job, right? Where they, intentionally maybe miss things out of the scope and intend to go back and sort of raise variations. What's your view on that approach? And I guess ultimately, if a contractor sees potentially gaps in the scope or the designs, should they raise that with the client, or what's the best way for them to handle that?
100% every single time, do not buy a job, is what I always say. When I have been representing contractors, when I've worked for contractors, when I've done my own contracting, I will always speak to a client and say, I am not going to be your cheapest. I will not be your cheapest price. I never have been and I never will be. My price is honest. And people buy that. If some people want the cheapest price, they might not necessarily be your client unless you're about a cheap product. So it all depends on your ethos of your business. If you're a budget project provider, then fine, and you're happy with that, and that's your market, and that's what you're dealing with. That's fine. And you want to be the cheapest, that's great. If you're a luxury housing provider and and that's your reputation, that's what you're delivering, and that's what you're selling, and that's what the client wants, that's different. So it all depends on your market ultimately. But I would never ever recommend missing things out, because ultimately it's just going to cause a problem and conflict. I always look at every single project and every decision I make and every advice I give, and I look at it as if it's going to go to dispute. So an associate member of the CIARB, so I'm dispute trained, and I look at every single thing as if it's going to go to dispute. How would this stand up in court? I've never gone to court because of that reason, on behalf of other people I have, but none of the contracts that I've ever had have ended up in dispute, because I look at them in that way. And I think if you're looking at it as if it's going to go to dispute and make sure that you're protected moving backwards, it starts with a tender and it's a start with that relationship. Now, even if you're looking at a 3 week job, you're still building relationships, and generally in construction things are much more than a couple of weeks. You do get the odd thing if you're, and very very small, but the type of people that we're going to be talking to and that are going to be interested in what we're doing are going to be much bigger projects, and they're going to be more than a week or two. So if you're looking at building this relationship, I'd never ever guarantee any relationship should be built on mistrust or misinforming someone. That's just not what I stand by. And I encourage people to be honest, and that's why I explain of what I call below the line, because it's fair. I don't recommend that people put everything into a contract sum without stipulating what they've added because there is information missing. Because I think when you say, actually this isn't right, and I've said this before, when you, this isn't right, this isn't right, you've missed this, you've missed that, it shows that you've paid attention, and also a level of professionalism. If you know full well you cannot deliver that project for that cost, you're starting the relationship in deceit. You're conning them, in my opinion. Um, and I don't believe in going in cheap and making up my money in variations. I think that's a terrible way of doing things. One, because it's just not ethical, and two, you can't guarantee that those variations are going to be paid, and unless you can substantiate them, unless you're talking about bullying tactics, and it's just not the way that the industry should be. And I think the industry would be a damn sight easier for everybody if people stop doing that.